Welcome to Billy Bob's Album of the Month. For the month of September 2023, I chose to feature the first Umlaut album. Now, granted, I did feature this album before, about 2 years ago when I first started my Facebook group, but I was quite scared and intimidated to even ask Bär the questions I wanted to ask, right? So, I decided to revisit it now that I have this YouTube channel. And I got a hold of Bär and I asked him all sorts of fucking questions this time. It took two separate Zoom meetings to get all the information out of him that I was wanting to get. Didn't even get to cover everything. We even ran out of time within that two Zoom meetings, so I failed to talk about the High Castle Tele Orchestra project that he is in, and I am sorry, Tim and Chris. I meant to touch base on those. It didn't happen. But there's all sorts of other great information out there that we did touch base on. So including Mr. Bungle and Secret Chiefs. So there's that. I do want to make a quick note. When we were discussing his demo, I said that there was a different Bär on the album cover than on his two latest ones. And I was wrong. It is the same Bär, but the contrast on it was so different that it looked like it was just redrawn, but it was the same Bär. They just photoshopped his arms inward to hold objects and changed the contrast. So my fault. I was wrong. But anyway, let's just jump into this shit. I think it turned out pretty good. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the bell, comments, all that other fucking bullshit. And fucking enjoy.
Yeah.
How'd you first get into music?
Let's see. How did I first get into music? I don't know. I think I'm trying to think of like the I don't know really. I guess I did get like hand me down clarinet, a hand me down clarinet from one of my sisters that I think basically it was my mom. I'm even doing the Australian like version of mom, and I say mom. Anyway, what happens when you live somewhere for 20 years? But my mother was sort of like she kind of just got us involved in extracurricular stuff, and maybe she saw a talent or an inclination towards something, but she had like my older sisters on like piano lessons, and but and then kind of got me into clarinet lessons because there was a hand-me-down clarinet, and as the story goes, I sort of was like, oh, I don't know. And then like I put the thing in my mouth and then I got like a note kind of straight away. And I was like, and my brain did this thing where it was like, oh, you can do this. And then from then on, I could, and seemingly had like a predilection towards it or something. But as far as music, it's weird because like when you ask that question, the first thing that popped into my head was like dancing to like being at some, not a disco, but like a some kind of dance thing, and me just like being okay to like doing like a two-step kind of thing for the whole thing alone by myself, and then deciding like, wow, I can really do this and I'm good at this, and like whether it's like you have rhythm or something like a sort of a natural ability, and then just having like kind of the time of my life. I was like probably 7 or 8, and like being at some fucking swim meet, after swim meet dance or something, which just sounds weird, but it was, I had so much fun. And I remember I was literally just doing like a two-step thing, like just kind of doing like, step, kind of like this thing. Sorry, everybody.
Oh, rocking it.
Just doing this and going back and forth. Or maybe it was maybe it was from the Osmonds, and I was like doing the step behind kind of thing where you kind of step behind. You can't really see my feet, so it doesn't really, but anyway,
I'm following.
So maybe it was like watching the Osmonds on TV as a little kid, and then being in love with Marie Osmond. I don't even know. It's because the other thing that the answer to that question, I feel like, is that music kind of found me. It's not like or that got me into music. It's more like music sort of got into me, and then has been sort of coming through me ever since, sort of, so to speak. But yeah, it would have been like the first music kind of like structure would have been like having to go to clarinet lessons because my mom said you're going to take clarinet lessons and off you go, kind of thing. And just trying to instill that sort of discipline or enrichment, I guess. So that's sort of how I guess it sort of started. But then like drums were something that I'll keep this short, but it was like drums was something that I found, I sort of discovered that I had a natural talent for, that like even more so than clarinet. Like I was just like, oh, I remember, I don't know if I saw, it was like a guy playing drums for some high school stage band thing and doing a solo. And I was just like, oh, I want to do that, because this guy's the rock star of the group, sort of, for a high school jazz stage band sort of situation. And then I just started playing drums. Like I literally made my own little kind of like, trash can rubber sort of rubber lidded Tupperware, kind of like had like three different Tupperware containers that had like, they were my toms, because you hit the back of them with a wooden spoon and they all made it like doo 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 kind of sound. And then duct taping a wooden spoon to a shoe was my kick pedal for it. I just made my own little drum kit, and then my mom saw that and then eventually bought me like a Remo PTS, like it's one of those pre-tuned head kits from like in the early 80s, early-ish mid 80s. And I was just blown away that I was that lucky to get it, that she would have got me a drum kit or whatever. But she saw sort of this anyway. So yeah, it was clarinet lessons, and then drums after that, and then saxophone, blah blah blah, whatever from there on. Yeah. But again, it wasn't really like a thing that got me into it, or somebody said like blah blah blah. It was just kind of like, it came from a place of like this is so long, this answer. Sorry. Yeah, it just kind of found me, and then I was just like, oh, I can kind of do this. And then as a little kid, you're sort of building your identity and kind of finding out what you can do and what you might be good at. And then it really bolstered like my ego or my self-esteem to sort of discover that I could do a thing and I might be good at it. And then you just kind of keep going. Yeah. Anyway. So I don't know if that's really how I got into music, because music was always around, but it wasn't like I came from an extremely musical family. But my older sister played piano, and I tried piano lessons, and I couldn't go from the numbers for the fingers until when they had to put letter names to the fingers. I was just like, oh, it was too much. And then I dipped out of piano lessons, where it seemed like initially kind of like didn't really go with me. And then I got onto clarinet. Like my mom's like, all right, well, if not piano lessons, let's put you on clarinet, because there's a little plastic clarinet that was handed down from an older sister. So yeah, that's maybe how that sort of happened. Sorry, it was way long. Ugh. So you can edit all that shit out.
No, I'm keeping it all. It was great. So what was your first musical project? Was Bungle your first band, or was there something before that?
There's a good old friend of mine named Ed Cole, who lives in Washington, Vancouver, Washington, I think, if that's correctly. Does a band called Trouble Cuts over in Vancouver, and he and I, I think after I got my drum kit, and he got an electric guitar around the same time. We would have been 12 or 13, and then we were just sort of mucking around with just like. And then he had like a 4-track that he brought over, which was his older brother's. So we were just like a duo, kind of just doing guitar and drums. Actually, we were the first White Stripes. No, yeah. So it was sort of this thing. We never did ever find a bass player that really worked. Even years and years later, it's funny. But we were always like sort of doing home recordings on 4-track kind of things, like just really basic kind of stuff, and sort of teaching our instruments to ourselves, and learning how to record, and learning how to make songs on a 4-track. And so that was kind of the first sort of band or project, if you will, that we had going. But it's interesting, like that was sort of the first thing, but it wasn't really an official kind of like gigging sort of band. It was just kind of like just doing home recordings and there's even like a photo of us with like a I think we called ourselves generic rock. It was so dumb. I mean, it's the 13-year-olds or whatever. But like put a thing on the drum, the kick drum saying generic rock, and we did like loose lip sync ships with some song that we'd made up, and then maybe another song that was like a crazy t-shirts. It was a brand that had like a Hawaiian kind of like schlock, I don't know, kind of fake Hawaiian phrases that was like, and it was just like kamana wanna lay you, just like a dumb kind of, I don't know, voulez-vous coucher avec moi kind of thing, but like with fake Hawaiian English. I don't know. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's a real phrase, but it just said, kamana wanna lay you, kind of like this, the sexual come on kind of thing. And it was just like, and then it was on a t-shirt or something. We're like, and then we did a song that was like, come on, I wanna lay you. Na, 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 na. So it was just like dumb kind of like pop punk rock songs. So that was when we were like, yeah, early teens, mid teens.
Doing
Yeah.
it.
So that was like my first thing. What's interesting is that actually this guy, Ed Cole, he invited me to come and see a show, which would have been the one time I would have been able to see Mr. Bungle before I was involved with it. Bungle was opening up for the Meat Puppets at HSU on campus. It was like a Wednesday night. This is many years later, and I was like maybe a senior in high school or something. And he was like, "Hey man, you were gonna go see the Meat Puppets with me?" And it's like an hour south from where we lived to go down to Humboldt. And because it was like a middle of the week thing, I was like, I don't know, nah, I'll probably no, yeah. I opted out of going to the thing. I didn't know anything about Mr. Bungle. I didn't know anything. I wasn't that clued in. But that would have been my one chance. I realized like all these like sort of years later, I was like, oh shit, I really blew it. I would have been able to kind of like be on both sides of it, kind of see it as like as an end, like because I never got to see them live before I was sort of involved with it. But that was the one time, and then like he'd come back after this gig, going like, "Oh, dude, oh my god, it was amazing." They were like throwing like hot dogs at the audience, or the audience was throwing hot dogs at them. And then by the end of the gig, like the bass player was like, Trevor was like like falling, almost falling down every two beats, and then like but not, and then playing like the most amazing bass, and then they were amazing. And then they did like a dog pile at the end of the show, and I'm like, oh, whoa, that sounds wild. And then of course I had no way of. I remember he came back with photos of it. He still has like photos of that first gig of the Bungle kind of world. But yeah, that was my one chance to kind of see it, like to be like a spectator, somebody on the outside before, yeah, becoming involved with it, sort of thing. So anyway, yeah, so that was my first little music project. That just with Ed Cole, just doing home kind of like 4-track things, which, a lot of it we still have somewhere, and there's like, we're just sort of learning how to write little pop songs, but they were very basic. There wasn't anything clever or necessarily or innovative about them. It was just like, oh yeah, we can just write some dumb lyrics and to some riffs and stuff, and then just put it together and build it. Yeah.
Awesome.
But basically Mr. Bungle. I mean, then when I did other stuff, but it was like other little things here and there. But they were always like pretty small time. Like was in a band. It sort of with my my future brother-in-law. We had like a bass player with that. He was a guitarist, and I was like playing drums and singing. Like we were just learning covers. I remember we'd learned like 15 different covers to do some I don't know, some gig or play a party or something. Really, in a small town, it was like the only like aspirations you had was to like learn some covers to play at a party, impress some girls maybe at a party, and like, yeah, be like do this little rock star kind of pantomime or something. And then we never even, it's such a small town, and there's such nothing happening that we never even we went through, we did all this rehearsing and then never played any parties. Maybe we did one time. Maybe we did once. I feel like we did at least one, but it was just, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. We didn't really know. And then we weren't sort of writing original material or whatever at that point. But yeah, just small town shit. And then because Bungle was really the first band that I was sort of in, where I was like trying to, well, actually, no, we did other things. Ed Cole and I did some other thing called I think we even opened up for Primus at like this place called Blue Lake, just outside of Arcata, which is basically Humboldt, HSU, and but yeah, Bungle was the first kind of real band per se that was like, oh yeah, we've got gigs, down in Bay Area, kind of to go and do and whatever. So
Wow. How'd you find yourself in Bungle?
um, see, so I went to Humboldt in '88, like you know that was my first sort of semester at HSU, and it was just the nearest state school. I was like, I'm so gonna just like minimal effort, like closest to home kind of like thing, my hometown or whatever. And so I ended up at Humboldt, just like as a music student. I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I could do music, so I'm like, I guess I'm a music major. But anyway, I was signed up to a jazz quartet. I think I auditioned for Gil Klein, who was the music director at HSU, and he heard my bombastic, like no dynamics playing, just like I was just like hitting this dude. I did a little drum like audition for this the jazz music guy at HSU, and then he put me in a group with Trevor and Trey. And I remember when we you know it was one of those things where it's like I didn't know about Trevor and Trey with Mr. Bungle or whatever. I think at that point in time, exactly at that point in time, was when Mike was kind of doing his, like, he was getting inducted, or maybe had been inducted into Faith No More, and it was probably recording the real thing or something, and was away. So like Bungle was on one of many hiatus or hiati, and and I got lumped into a jazz, or was assigned to a jazz quartet with Trevor and Trey on guitar and bass, and then there was like a trumpet player. It was just like a little basic jazz, jazz 101. I don't know. It was just like a little quartet thing, and I got assigned to Trevor and Trey's thing. So it was really kind of like Gil Klein from HSU that got me into in a room with Trevor and Trey, and then they were like, they knew I played saxophone maybe or something. I think later, or maybe Trey, I don't know. And then they were like, they needed a horn player, so I was asked to go into to Mr. Bungle with like that. And it was like, again, it was like that, one of these lulls in activity with Mr. Bungle, between probably the what was it, the God Damn It, I Love America, and the OU 818 demo or whatever. So yeah, it was. But I remember at the time, because I can remember like we were looking, it's like one of those classic scenes, like out of maybe Whiplash, where the students are in the hallway and they're like looking at who they got assigned with for like different groups at the beginning of a semester, and somebody was like, "Oh man, you got Trevor and Trey," and it was just like, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what does that even mean? And like somebody knew that there was something special about those guys, and how lucky, to be put in or assigned to a student kind of like jazz quartet. And that's how I kind of met Trevor and Trey, and then they knew later that I played saxophone also, which is something I'd started doing after like being a clarinet sort of student in all through high school and whatever, and was sort of dabbling in saxophone a little bit, and same sort of same tunings, like a B flat tenor is a B flat clarinet, it's like a same sort of, the same tuning. And then so Trey asked me to be, and they were like sort of in the like a period of inactivity, or they'd let go a former horn player, and then they needed another horn player, and then they were sort of like doing a little bit of rebuilding of Mr. Bungle, and I was just sort of like drafted into that, not knowing kind of what I was getting into, but I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. I remember saying something along the lines of like, yeah, I'm probably not good enough, or just doing this like really self-deprecating thing. I'm probably not good enough, just like talk, like, it was ridiculous. Like, people, I know so many musicians, more worthy musicians maybe, would have died to have that chance, or seen the real value of it, of just as far as like interesting and talented people. And I'm walking in the door going like, I probably can't do it, but I'll give it a try. Like this real sad sack horseshit. Anyway, luckily they believed in me enough to kind of let me get phased in there. Yeah.
So the God Damn It, I Love America was the demo tape that you had to learn when you first joined the band?
Well, I didn't have to learn it. It was more like that. That is what had come out. And I remember like we had listened to it before. I remember loving Bloody Mary, going like, just even like, and of course at that time I was like, I was really playing a lot of bass too. So I was like, you become fascinated as a sort of self-teaching student of bass with Trevor's bass lines. And it's just like that opening sort of bass line to Bloody Mary or whatever. And I was just like amazed at how like Theo's really fast tonguing on this. Like how the fuck does he do that? It's so fast. Theo always had like a really fast tongue with these things. And but no, I remember we were listening to that as like, sort of, because after Ed, my good friend, had gone to see this gig where they were opening for Meat Puppets on campus. And then he had the Goddamn I Love America tape, and we were listening to it going like, fuck, what is this? This is so wild. And like, and then just hearing Mike singing, and even at the really early stages all those years ago, it was just like, what is this? And so but yeah, I won't claim to be hip or like that. I knew like how, I just didn't, I wasn't listening to cool shit in high school. I just wasn't, man. I was like, only the coolest thing I was listening to in the come up was like the Police. Like, I remember the Police All Around the World was like a documentary, and I always loved Stuart Copeland's drumming. I always thought like I always equated him with like a sort of an Eddie Van Halen of drums, meaning like, it's him as soon as you hear him playing. You fucking, it's just, there's no question that it's Stuart Copeland, whether it's that super high tuned snare that he has, the way he plays, and then I love how hard he hit the drums. I love the energy and the like, just that the guy put in. So that was as cool as I got in high school. Like, it's funny, like my girlfriend just yesterday was watching like The Descendants on some old videos, and I was going like, oh man, I remember, or even DRI or something like this. And it's just like, I remember like seeing this stuff around, but I was just like, it was like, I was still, I was listening to like Sting and the Police and shit in high school, and other stuff, and like the Yellow Jackets and like a little bit of like fusion kind of stuff. And
There's
but
no shame
I
in
don't know,
that.
man. I didn't. No, it's just like, and again, it's like, I feel like, I wouldn't. I just wasn't. Like, even my friend Ed was like listening to stuff like No Means No and stuff, and going like, listen to this, how fucking good these guys are. It's like, and I was just blown away with the power and the technical thing, but also with that kind of punk thing, and then just how dark a lot of those No Means No things, like, and just kind of getting a little bit of this stuff kind of like from my much hipper friend Ed Cole, who was like, that I was doing music with since I was 13, kind of fucking around, and then we were living together off campus a little bit and still kind of doing music together a little bit here and there, and then the Mr. Bungle thing was sort of overlapping with that a little bit. But anyway, sorry, I maybe I forgot your initial question. Oh yeah, how did I get involved with those guys? Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you continue.
So you ended up in Mr. Bungle and you recorded OU818. What was that experience like?
It was amazing because like Trevor loves to write out charts really fastidiously and really beautifully. Like, this guy he's like, as amazing as a musician is, he's like, he also has the most beautiful, I forget what you'd even call it, just like I don't know what was the word for it, with the way of like the notation. There's a word for it. Then this is, somebody's probably yelling it at the video right now or typing it into the comments later. But it's just like, just like he'd write out these like perfect charts that were just like, like for all the horn parts for the things. It wasn't like, oh yeah, here's a tape of something, as it would be at the time. It would have been cassettes, but it was here, go learn these songs, and your part is the trumpet part, so learn it. And I mean that would have been a good ear training sort of exercise, but he had all the things written out, so it was like, oh, it's all right here. And then of course that becomes a crutch, and you're like, okay, I have to memorize this stuff. So but it was really easy. It couldn't have been easier because Trevor wrote everything out, as a part of it, as a music student and whatever. And he would just, I mean, these charts, it's like, even now, if I was like, well, maybe I'll sell these on eBay. They probably people would probably, probably be happy to pay for like this is a Trevor Dunn like chart like of like Waltz for Grandma's Sake or Aim to Confuse
Oh yeah,
or
I would
whatever it
totally
might
buy
be.
that.
Yeah, like yeah, it's just like these things where you're like, what? This is like this looks like it's something that's really professionally printed out or whatever, but it looks even better than that because it actually has like his character and his like beautiful. What is the word for it? We should pause the thing and find the word so people aren't like, Jesus Christ, this guy's been doing music for however many years and he doesn't know what it's called. But yeah, it was. But to record it, I don't know. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was like Trey would teach me all the keyboard stuff that I would do, like live and whatever, and on it kind of like on its own. And so that was, Trey was like, oh, we need you to play some keyboard parts too and whatever. So then that's how I got into some of that, just for stuff. But I'm trying to think what it was like. It was where did we do that even? I think we did that at what like Dancing Dog Studios or something. I don't know. It was cool. It was just like I remember like being bummed out that we didn't record Mr. Nice Guy or put it on the first album. I sort of did. It was sort of perplexed me. I don't have even a good answer to this day. Trey would probably have a good answer for that. I'm hopefully gonna run into these guys this weekend in San Francisco. With if I can time it out and whatever because I'm flying over. Supposed to be flying over to California pretty soon. But anyway, so like I'm hoping to catch up with those guys, like, and maybe I'll ask him, but why didn't Mr. Nice Guy ever make it onto that first album? Because that was such like, I mean, when we played that song live, it was just like the place, just like, and even when we did these gigs way back in the day, the first gigs I was doing, we were like, a lot of it was opening up for Primus and the like Stuck on This era, and those gigs, dude. Oh my god, I can't even say like they were like they really were kind of the high point of the whole thing because like to see like 700 people in a club like just you're like doing like Tommy the Cat or whatever or whatever other Primus songs, it's just like that's when that shit was just like before it sort of become more mainstream, such as it was. Those were just like the most ecstatic and kind of like exciting fun gigs ever, and then also having like an entire audience like sing back to you "Squeeze Me Macaroni," the choruses "We got you," whatever, just like yeah, mind-blowing kind of stuff, like the energy, because later on, as you know, with the Mr. Bungle stuff, it was more like we're going to torture you and we're going to see if you can hang on for the ride kind of thing. Not that it was ever stated like that, but it seemed to me, especially that first U.S. tour that we did after the first proper like Warner Brothers album. I was just like, this audience doesn't know and what they're going to get, or they're so kind of expecting like a Faith No More kind of like, yeah, we're just going to play some songs and like
And then they get
come
welcome
out and
back.
do like. Or they get tortured with a 20-minute noise jam for the first 20 minutes of the gig, and people like you see these faces kind of going like faces looking up at you like they don't realize they've got this pained look on their face. I don't know, maybe a lot of people were like right into it going, yeah man, torture us some more, we love it, da, 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 but then play Girls of Porn kind of thing, and then the more an audience would yell for Girls of Porn, the less chance they would get to hear it. And I was just like, why? That's a fun song to play. Why don't we just play it? Anyway.
Oh, you 818, fucking great shit. But then you guys ended up on fucking Warner Brothers for that self-titled. Tell me a bit about that shit.
Okay. Well, that was just like, I think it just worked out that somehow the people that know the lawyers or whatever, they were the sort of like, well, we want to keep Mike involved, and I think it was one of those things. And again, I'm not like a reliable source, as I say, but it's like really, I just think, and I'm probably getting this so wrong, and I know the real heads are gonna take me to task or eviscerate me. But it was one of these things where it was like, I think it just worked out that to keep it under like a certain umbrella, to keep Mike under a certain umbrella, that they were like, okay, slash da da da. Okay, how do we make keep the lead singer happy with Faith No More, some kind of thing. And it was like kind of a thing like that, where it's like, well, we'll just and keep it all in one kind of place. So let's put it on this, have them on the Warner Brothers thing. But I honestly, I wasn't really there for a lot of those meetings and whatever, so I don't really know the kind of like the behind the scenes thing of like the political thing that made that sort of come together. Like, yeah, that's where I'm. So I sort of feel bad. I'm like,
Well,
so much of the time with Mr. Bungle, I was just sort of like, I was just like kind of like, what, we're doing what now? Huh? I'm just like trying to learn the music and do the best I can with the music, and then like all the political stuff or the managerial stuff, I was just like, I'd rather kind of not know in a way. So that's where I'm kind of not the best source with that. So I
but the music
apologize.
was fucking perfect. So you did what you needed to.
Yeah, thanks so much.
That self-titled album really fucking blew me away. I'd never heard anything like that when I first come across it.
Wow,
Fucking phenomenal.
thanks.
What's your favorite memories of that album?
I don't know. It's like I mean, I did my horn parts I think on a weekend coming in for that, but we've been playing those songs for a minute before we even got there. And I always kind of had the feeling that like the OU&A, if that's right, that kind of probably should have been the first album. You know, I was sort of feel like because it had a lot of energy, and sometimes by the time we got to the main album, I was like, man, we've been playing these songs for so long. I'm worried that they're going to start sounding a little tired or lifeless or something. Um, but it was all really cool. I remember it was like this place called Different Fur Recording Studios, and that for me, you know, and then just me as a small town kid coming down to San Francisco and then recording that stuff, it just felt like, wow, you know, and really the summary of it for me is like, I remember having this thought of like, wow, I'm on a major label and I'm only 21. I got in like in this band, you know, and I thought like, honestly, I was like, oh shit, this is my life done. I'm like, I've already like, you know what I mean? I wasn't kind of like, I was just so grateful, and I felt like I just kind of lucked into it, and I really did in a lot of ways. You know, that I was just like, wow, this is like if nothing else happens in my life, I should be grateful that I was here for this, and I was able to kind of just, you know, be involved with this. The music was always great, and these guys were some of the most talented and intuitive and weird and fucking just like, I mean, you know, I mean, Mike Patton. I mean, are you seriously like you're in the room with a guy, you're like, this guy can literally do anything. Like he can. Anyway, so you're like, and then you know, Trevor and Trey are just like amazing players and amazing composers. Trey's like a sonic architect, and you know, Trevor was always like, I just always loved his playing and his like burly forearms when he's playing bass. You're like, oh, look at that definition on that forearm, Trevor. Man, you're the man. You're the stupid shit. And then Danny, like as a drummer and just like a deadpan kind of comedian, is just like, you know, he's even to this day, he's like, I can't, I feel embarrassed when I get in a text thread with him because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to match this kind of the inventiveness and the wit that this guy like just destroys people with. He's like the funniest person I know. Like he's just and so just like smart and beautiful and all this stuff. And you know, anyway, yeah, I was just blown away. I honestly couldn't believe my luck, and I was just and I had so many moments where I'm like, what me? What do I have to do with like, you know, that's a lot of this self doubt, a lot of this kind of like, you know, because I'm cognizant 30 years, 20 years later, whatever, that it's like people would have died to kind of to swim across an ocean to audition just to be in the band, and they would have been much more worthy players or this that the other, and I just was kind of like, what? No, I probably can't do it. I'll give it a try, and then I'm in it, and then once I got in there, I made sure I did everything to kind of like, you know, prove my worth or whatever, or earn my keep or whatever the fuck, you know. It's just like, sorry for the cursing. I forgot.
I don't give two
Anyway.
shits. I'm not going to edit that
No,
out.
it's just like I just like anyway. But yeah, so it's like this thing of believe my luck, and I was always kind of pinching myself. And even when I met like Patton for the first time, he was just dressed in his like Lakers kind of gear and had his long hair and his baseball cap on, you know, sideways and whatever else, just like a little like hood rat kind of like, you know, so it was just like, it was just very surreal for me. I mean, I just constantly was just like, I just felt like I was just like holding on for dear life of like, wow, this is something special and something really cool, and I can't believe how lucky I am to be involved in it. So I'm going to do everything I can to not, stuff it up. So,
What's your favorite horn riff from that album?
oh, I don't know. I mean, like all of them were great. Like Squeezy Macaroni was had great horn lines. Love is a Fist had a great little breakdown. You know, Girls of Porn was always fun, and it was always like, and to see the energy. I mean, Carousel was always fun. Like Stub a Dub was. I mean, they were all like. There wasn't anything that was kind of like, oh, this one's sort of a dragger. This one's not that good or whatever. Um, you know, I was just. It was all good to me. I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I really love like Egg. Egg and Stub a Dub. I always just thought those are like really fun ones. But Mishka Mausch was like all that kind of stuff. Sorry, my phone is dying here.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna have to
my
plug it in.
So when you were saying torture to see if you could appreciate, were you referring to like the first track off of Disco Volante?
Yeah, I mean that was maybe a kind of a litmus test. Yeah, sort of that thing where I'm sure it's thrilling to to the real heads, and they're kind of like, yeah, man, they come out with this like everyone I went to high school with this dead thing, But it is kind of like a thing where, I mean, even now it's interesting how like with this new umlaut thing, we're in the process of kind of like, okay, what is the best sequence for these tracks? And there's like a couple of oddballs in there, and like where do we fit these? And our bass players of the mind that he's like, yeah, just that track that's really good, but you're sort of like, it's sort of an oddball. Like maybe have it just be the opener, so then it'll sort of throw people off, like if they're listening to it in a sort of album way. I mean, do people even still do that? I don't know.
I'm on.
I'm sure
I
they
do.
do. No, I know, I know. But it's like, so it would be a thing of like, yeah, throw people off, and then or seemingly throw people off, or just give them something challenging to be like, what the is this? And then it goes into like what's this thing that comes after that? It's like so he goes into something like that where it's like, oh, this is so it's sort of like it's difficult listening, and a person has to be a brave listener to kind of to it's just that thing. It's I always feel like when people try to, like, if I try to let people know about my background or what I've been involved in, or they're like, if they're interested or whatever, like a coworker at my day job, but if I'm bothering to kind of do it, I was like, yeah, man, it's like, I don't know, it's this thing, and it's like people either love it or hate it. There's no kind of in between. You're either like, oh yeah, I'm in, and then if they're in, they're really in, and if they don't like it, they hate it. And it's just kind of like, yeah, that's and again, I always think of it as like the people that are into it, that know, it's like they're brave listeners, man. And it's kind of like they like the fact that it's like, oh, this kind of, I don't know how this makes me feel, and it's kind of make me a little angry, but then I like that. It's like, why is this making me? Yeah, and then they're into it, and then by the time they do get to the bits where it's sort of like it's properly objectively beautiful, whether it's melodically or harmonically or whatever, or just like you really go, holy shit, listen to this guy's voice and what he can do with it. It's just like by the time you get to that, it's like, oh man, it's the payoff of like, yeah, this was difficult and I had to go through some kind of pain to get there, but by the time they gave you that payoff or that whatever, it's like it's worth it, and you kind of know, and then you feel that bond, or you're like, yeah, these are my people, or this, I finally some music that it matches the stuff that's playing in my head already. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that opening for Disco Volante was definitely one of those things. I mean, like, it's all these years later, I remember listening to the first album and going like, man, there's a lot of like between track like shenanigans and whatever else, and like, and I kind of was, remember, like at the time kind of going like, oh man, people are not gonna hang in for this. I'm kind of like, why are we just and then even it's funny that even later on when we came through on that the tail end of that first American tour, I think who's the guy from Slayer, the main guy, who's that? What is his name? It's escaping me. The bass player, the singer.
Oh, fuck
You know.
it.
Anyway, the main. Sorry,
It
we both didn't have enough coffee. Um, so he was like backstage with like Trevor and Mike, and he was going like, "What are you guys doing?" He was like, you know, as far as like, stop fucking with the audience, man. Like, just play the songs. You know, and it's kind of funny coming from somebody like that, you know, where you're going like, yeah, this is, Slayer, circa 86 is always, I'm always like that Rain and Blood was just like, what, and like, and you're sort of, they're gods. They were really gods, and so when you hear like one of the Godfathers, so to speak, kind of like going like, what are you doing? Like, just play the songs. What do you guys, what's all this fucking around and this seeming, I mean, they're my words, but like contempt for the audience. And I don't think it was contempt as it was just kind of like, we're not going to make this easy for you. And I don't, and again, and maybe that's the thing of like, Mike Patton kind of like knowing that people are going to be like, he could be punching them in the face and like, yeah, man, give me another one, kind of thing. And, I get that kind of thing. And to a degree, but just sort of like, maybe it's that whole thing of we're just trying to see how much people can take, yeah. So I don't know if I'm really answering a question there, but
so
you got to just cut me off and go like, all right, that's too much. It's too much. Or maybe you can do it later. You edit it later. But man, once you get me going, I don't shut the F up. So you got to just kind of go like, all right, that's enough. That's enough on that. Okay, next question.
Okay, but this is all good. This is all golden. Like I said, this is all golden. After you did Disco Volante, Secret Chiefs first came about, and you were on that first Secret Chiefs. Tell me what that experience was like.
Well, that was just, again, so many hiatuses, and then Trey's working on that thing, and that thing's coming, together, and it's sort of like another musical outlet for Trey, and then like I'm just sort of there, like, and then he needs somebody to play some extra stuff to go along with that. So I'm like, sort of drafted in there because I'm around maybe. But that was always really cool, and it just like, and then the idea that it's like it was all instrumental, that it was like, so it was like, to me it was like really interesting instrumental, sort of like, I almost said pop music, because I always referred to like Umlaut as that, as sort of instrumental pop music, and then now we're sort of like, with this latest album, it's going to be kind of, unflinching, unapologetic, just kind of rock and pop kind of things a little bit. And but that was always very cool, and it just was like it was kind of a thing for me in a way. It sort of, we were sort of biding time, waiting to be able to do more bungle stuff, and then Trey just such a musical force that it was just like, he's no shortage of things to sort of do or dream up or play. And I mean, I'm trying to answer your question. Like, what was it like? It was just, again, it was just really cool. It was really fun. And in fact, that very first Secret Chiefs gig, I think, was like it was in one of these places, which was like kind of it seemed like it was sort of a party, like a house party in the Mission District. If that's even correct, Trey would probably correct that, or specify it better. And then, and then Trevor was involved with that as well, which, left a bad taste in some people's mouths, as far as like most of the bungle guys, like minus Mike, and or if not all of us, minus, well, maybe not Theo, but anyway, so it was just like, it was really cool, and it was just like, it was really fun, and it was really raw, and it felt like a sort of a shot in the arm, because it had kind of this like the mystique and the energy of the Mr. Bungle kind of like thing, but not Mr. Bungle, but it still had the energy. I remember it was just like, man, that first gig was like probably the funnest gig I ever did with Secret Chiefs, was because it was just kind of like, it's like a room, probably not much bigger than this one that I'm in, sort of, and which is pretty tiny, but probably closer to the one you're in. I imagine your room's probably bigger there, but it's like, it was a pretty smallish room, and then like, there wasn't like a stage, there wasn't a PA, but we're just like blasting out this, that the first kind of surf kind of rock kind of stuff that that first album with Secret Chiefs was doing, and it was just like, yeah, it was exhilarating, man. It was just like it's hard to put my finger on it, but it really does stand out in my mind as like that was the energy of that was wild because people were probably waiting for something Mr. Bungle related ish, and then it wasn't Mr. Bungle, but it was still really cool and really just kind of like what the hell is it and instrumental, so there wasn't like a focal point per se as far as like a front person and you know everybody kind of like oh the singer and da, da, da. It was just like a band playing really cool music and you know it was amazing. It was just like again I was just like I was just kind of a team player with that and just taking direct you know very specific direction from Trey. So I felt like a kind of a very much a sideman in that. But it was really a lot of fun, man. And just like, you know, just what we needed. And there was so much downtime with Mr. Bungle, you know, it's like, and even to this day, I hate to say, but no, and so it was exhilarating, man. It was just, yeah, just so much fun and just so cool. And people, and it was funny because it was a palpable thing as far as that first Secret Chiefs thing where I felt like it was like, oh, these are bungle heads that are going like, okay, what they finally kind of know what the story is, and then locally and whatever they kind of know like who the guys are and whatever, and then they're like, it's not Mr. Bungle, but it's some other kind of thing, and it's just like da da da, and then like the anticipation and the energy was palpable. It was just amazing, yeah, a lot of fun, and then really cool, you know, like just the scales and the tonalities of what Trey did, and then Trey has gone deeper and deeper with that, with like you know the microtonal stuff and the quarter tone kind of thing, which I would never claim to have even begun to got my head around. But apparently like the harmony, like the overtone series is a truer overtone series with you know that style that type of music. So it's just like I remember Trey tried to explain it to me, and I felt like I was like you know talking to a physicist about like you know quantum you know quantum you know physics or something. I'm like what? I tried to I tried to go along as much as I could, but it's you almost feel like you need like a degree to kind of even begin to understand like his whole theoretical kind of framework with that. And then that's only one side of it, you know. And then he's got the other thing that yeah, that is just like, I mean, he's done his best to try to explain it to me, but I'm just like, I kind of my head starts swimming, and I just like, I'm gonna go back and just start, you know. So my phone's getting notifications. I'm just gonna go back to doing like dumb pop music.
Yeah, yeah.
Something that I
Well,
can actually
Western
yeah
scales are so much easier.
well you know it's funny, it's like it's an interesting thing where you know people, I remember people going like asking me once, they're like why did Trey kind of go into this Eastern sort of thing, and I'm like going like man I can't speak for Trey, but he did explain it to me that you know that it's like I'm sorry my phone, I don't know if my charger port is like quite working. Let me see if it's actually, hang on, see if this thing's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. Come on, my phone is just all it's a little bit glitchy. Hopefully it's not going to die on us while we're sitting here. Um, but yeah, it's just like he's like I said, he tried to explain it to me one time, and I was sort of getting a little bit, you know, it's like even the guy at High Castle Tell Orchestra's, you know, Tim Smallins is a real kind of like he knows his shit with that kind of stuff, and he probably has done like video like video after video about sort of explaining like the you know that sort of like the overtone series and how it relates to this and that and the other thing, and you're just like yeah man I'm still trying to figure out western harmony and stuff, you know. I'm still trying to kind of get my head around that and exploit it as well as I can with my music. So I'm not ready to kind of like delve into these things, and I mean you know, so I'll stay in my lane.
So let's move on to California. One of my favorite albums of fucking all time. I managed to score it at a let's see, the first day it came out, I saw somebody putting it on a shelf at a Blockbuster Video. Bought it right then and there. It fucking changed my life.
Wow,
Fucking great,
awesome,
great
thanks.
album. I
Thank you.
even got that shit tattooed on my arm, you know?
Wow. So when you give somebody a shiver, what is a forearm shiver? It's like the last thing
Yeah, yeah. Take some of that bungle in your face.
knocks some knock some musical sense into you, buddy. No, no, that's terrible. Come on, we would never do. We would not promote violence. Sorry, sorry.
The music is violent enough.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You got to be a brave. Yeah, that's right. It's a violent. That's a really good like tagline or something. Oh, sorry, man. These. Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like it's violent listening. It's not difficult listening. It's listening. It's violent listening. But it, even though that the California album is kind of more like, all right, here's some songs. It's less kind of like, you know, like trying to perplex people with like, secret tracks or hidden whatevers, or just like, anyway, yeah, it was definitely more kind of straight down the line as far as like compositionally. I would say it's interesting because I sort of see the California album as like that was me like kind of beginning to kind of learn how to make music, how to compose music, and a few of my ideas made it onto that one compositionally. They were always encouraging me more and more to kind of get my voice in there. And it's just a shame that the after those three albums it sort of like had an unceremonious death, I think in 2004 or something. But I was like at that point, like from like 2000 to 2004, that's actually when I was learning like the most that I'd kind of done in as my two young children were sort of growing up. Around that time, I was just like doing nothing but kind of just composing and figuring out how to get a good melody with a cool chord progression and this kind of thing. So it just, it's like I always say, like that first Umlaut thing was like, it was sort of my, in a way, it was kind of like what all the music I would have hoped to kind of present as like, oh, so what have you got, Bär? I'd be like, here it is, and they'd be like, oh shit, this is a whole thing, like we're gonna pick the best ones out of this, and then we were lucky to kind of get patent on the Atlas face, that was like a total kind of like, yeah, it was again a lucky thing, and like I think I'd sent him three tracks of things that like maybe something would speak to him, and then he sort of glommed onto that one and then recorded that, and it was just like holy shit, it just was like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about, you know what I mean? And it was like it just felt like that first album, the Umlaut one, was like all these things that I would have intended for like the next Mr. Bungle thing if we had done like a fourth album of that with that sort of lineup and whatever, and then just hadn't just wasn't to be, I guess, such as
Yeah.
it was. So.
Let's move on to Umlaut. That okay, so
Sure.
I actually managed to come across that first demo, all your recordings from before that first release.
Oh
How long?
wow, like the
How
one
long
with
have you
the
been
bear
keeping
on it or
the demo?
something.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a bear. It's the
Yeah, yeah. It's like black or something, sort of.
yeah, yeah. But wait, it almost looks like the what's the Arantula album, but
What you call it?
without
Yeah.
the egg.
Yeah. Well, I think it might be. It might be the same one.
Oh,
I think it might be the same bear.
it's slightly different. It's slightly different.
Is it okay? I love that the guy you're talking to doesn't even know what's on his own stuff, but it's been a minute. Yeah, yeah. I think we just sort of went with that. But sorry, what was the question?
Oh, that I came across that demo, which was all the rough tracks of that. How long have you been working on that before you decided to record it as a full-on album?
Probably from 2003 until was like stuff was probably like floating around from like even as far back as that, if not 2002. I feel like yeah, there's a lot of ideas that were kind of like just incubating or germinating or whatever. And then yeah, it seemed like, and even now, like we're like this latest album, I'm like I've got a riff, or no, not the album. There's like another idea I'm working on, kind of post the album that we still have to release. Hopefully not too long. It's like an idea that's from like I remember like San Francisco 1999 or something. And this little kind of like loping riff, and I'm like, it's now going to be the opening riff of a song that I'm doing in like probably 2024. It's just crazy because it's like these things like I'm like, oh man, that was a cool little riff. I never really did anything with that. So So here it is. And so there's a lot of that happens. Yeah, but it's, it's interesting. Like, so I don't even know when that first thing you're referring to came out, or sort of, what was it, 2005 maybe?
It was
So maybe
five
it
or
was two.
six. The
Yeah.
internet was vague about it. The internet was vague, you know.
Yeah, so it might have been. I feel like it was sort of done around, up and then into 2005 or something. So probably from 2003 to 2005 with like, but it's like, yeah, who knows, man. Some of these things, yeah, they've got like, you sort of realize like, oh wait, this riff or this thing, this idea is maybe 30 years, it's like goes back 30 years and it's just been like floating around and never quite finding a home. And then you find like, oh yeah, this actually goes really well with this or this whatever, yeah. So
Just treat you forget. Everything's gonna be alright. Just treat you forget. Everything's gonna be alright.
Yeah, and then you finally did release that as you went to the studio, recorded it as a full length album, and released it not demo form. How should I word that? No, your first
yeah,
official
well,
release. Um,
yeah, it's sort of because it was that really was more of a kind of like a demo, just working with a friend that I here in Melbourne. And it's just like and he was a real kind of like help. This guy Matt Creedon, sort of yeah. Then so that was just like it was more of a demo, and then it was just like, oh, here's some ideas, and then we recorded other things at his place, and then but it wasn't until it was like the first Umlaut one that stuff was actually kind of more properly recorded.
in 2009. In 2009.
Yeah, that was the thing that we put out in 2009. Yeah, on a thing that is now defunct, Amphead Records or something.
Yeah, that album was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah. And again, it really is because in so many ways, it's just that it's just because it was something that it was also just kind of like, me kind of like going like, oh man, if ever Mr. Bungle would blah blah blah, and like, you know what I mean, like that would have been my ideal home for a lot of these things. I know those guys would have been able to really do cool stuff with that, and so it was just me kind of biding my time, going like, oh well, I guess if I guess I gotta put this out myself and do this and whatever and get on with life and living. Yeah, but it would have been, like I said, it would have been like stuff that I would ideally have like put towards that thing, because I was like I said, I was finally kind of going like, oh yeah, I'm kind of understanding how to construct a thing or make a thing not be too long, or how to just build songs out from the inside out, instead of like necessarily like, okay, start with them and just go left to right with your riff or your ideas, realizing that you can build a song, like you can start from literally the middle or even the very end of a song, or even look at a lot of times, I think even with like Pink Cigarette, name of it, what am I, Pink Cigarette, is that the name of the song? I'm having like a
Oh
senior
yeah,
moment
yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
Yeah,
So that song, like the intro to that was like almost kind of an afterthought at the very end. So it's like, I love that kind of thing too, where you can finish a piece of work or something, and then later on go like, oh, what would be really cool coming into this, and it's just like this kind of, you know what I mean, which is ironic because it's like it's an intro, but it's actually like something that was like way at the end of the whole process that you sort of, and that to me was another kind of like mind expanding thing to realize that, like, and that even continues to this day, even on this next album we're coming out with, like, we'll hear like something, an instrument or a soloed thing, and then just because we're trying to check a thing, and then we're going like, oh, that's really cool, we should put that at the wherever else, or as an outro or this or that. So it's like it's always fun to realize like there's not just like a left to right, there's not a through top to bottom, or start at the beginning and then go to the end. It's like you can put the thing there and then go like, all right, maybe I can, and just kind of like, and especially with like all these tools with like these workstations and whatever, you can just kind of like, maybe just kind of go like this, what about like this, and stack it like this and all this kind of thing. So it's like, instead of whereas once upon a time somebody's just like sitting there going like, okay, what's the next thing after this, what does this kind of feel like this should go into, or what should this come out of, and whatever. Yeah, so it's that was another kind of thing, kind of revelatory to my brain anyway.
let's move on to Your Poverty Quietly Go. That's a fucking great release as well, right? I was just
Thanks,
jamming
man.
that one earlier today as I was working. Tell me a bit about that one.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that title is pretentious as shit. So, no, I don't know. For some reason, I don't know, but it just popped in my head, and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of poetic, maybe. But no, that one was done with this guy Joe Talia, who's a drummer, and he spends most of his time in Japan apparently, but and I can't really claim to speak to what he's doing like professionally or even artistically so much. But he did a great job as like just with the quality of that recording, and we were still trying to just I don't know. I felt like it was recorded very live in a lot of ways, like the basic tracks certainly, and it just has a great kind of sound to it. And then it was interspersed with some really shitty kind of 4-track stuff and other things where it's just like almost embarrassing to listen back and be like, God, why didn't I record that better or on a better instrument or whatever. But what was that one? That was again still just me kind of like really figuring out how to write music, and whether it's like just like because I feel like there's a real period where I was just like going like, okay, how do I make a chord progression? And then is this like a 16-bar chord progression, or is it a 14-bar chord progression? Which I was always like, oh, whoa, that's a weird one. Or if it's like a 5-bar, whoa, this is like a 5-bar phrase. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool, And then just sort of discovering these things, sort of showing up, and then just these things coming out, and then trying to build them out. And that was when the band was kind of more. The Umlaut thing was more of a bigger ensemble, and we had like a vibes player in the thing, and then like a dedicated keyboardist, and sometimes like a horn section, and then that sort of became less and less like viable, or it's just like scheduling horn players and a bigger band, like everybody to come to a rehearsal, like you become like an office manager, you have to really have this kind of like a strong stomach for just not minding checking a bunch of emails and seeing like, no, I can't do this thing, but what about this thing? And I can't do it. And it's just like, there's so much energy that goes into organizing and scheduling and whatever else. If you don't have like an assistant or an acting, sort of band manager, that it's just like, it can almost kill your whole, because it's like, if you don't live with the people and then you're just trying to schedule the things between people's jobs and this and that, it's a whole thing, man. It really is like a full-time thing where you just like, but the Your Poverty Quietly Go was just like, it was kind of like some really well-recorded, lush, kind of like expansive kind of things, orchestral kind of things, if you will, and then just, juxtaposed with really shitty, raw 4-track things that were like, oh man, I want to put this on there, like even like I think dominate television, like what is it? Dominate Television Snack Time or something. One of these things is like a 4-track thing, which we have a different name for when we actually play it. We call it rondo or something, but which is neither here nor there. Anyway, it's just like so this just that sort of contrast, and then I was like just throwing stuff on there, like, oh yeah, I want to throw this one on there as like a little interlude thing where like some of those things were just like almost throwaway kind of things, and I'm like, I'll put them on this album. Maybe they didn't really fit in the real scheme of things. A person's doing like a really traditional album kind of things, and I've never really known what I'm doing musically or artistically or thematically or whatever. I just get a collection of songs that like, okay, this is what we've got for this, and let's put it out. Like there's a lot of people where people would be like, yeah, that one doesn't really go on that and doesn't really work, whatever else. And not that I've been trying to follow some template or much less a bunch of rules or whatever, but I like the idea. I mean, maybe that came from the Mr. Bungle world of like, yeah, let's have something that sounds like it doesn't fit, go here. It's just like people like, what? And then only kind of later I'll listen to it and go, oh yeah, that is kind of jarring to listen to the uninitiated, to whatever. But yeah, that I guess I'm not even answering your questions ever. But it's more like what was it like? It was more like I don't know. It had like a lot of really my highest level of like harmonic kind of like just conception, like whether it's like I forget what even some of the names of the songs are. SFDA, maybe there's one on there. It's just like these were things that I cobbled together and worked on probably too long as far as like the composition side of it. It was probably like some of it was kind of overwrought and kind of like what? It's just like it takes so many different turns, or even like the 11th victim, which I'm like, but you know, I actually recently listened to it and I was like, man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean, if I do say so, not to brag or whatever, but it's just like, I do listen to it and kind of almost have an odd out of body experience. I'm going like, how the hell how did I come up, you know, with this stuff and then kind of see it through and put it together, you know? But it's like, that's all kind of like still, there's this through line where people go like, oh yeah, I've heard people say like, oh, I can really hear Bär's sort of influence, or where Bär, you know, and it really is kind of like, no, it's more like the bungle thing, and just getting marinated with those great musicians minds, and then you're pushing forward and going through, and then you find yourself later, and you kind of look back and you're like, oh shit, that does have kind of an echo of what it like, or maybe the Mr. Bungle DNA is kind of still in there a little bit, and then it's filtering through me and my sensibility of what, you know, and it's just kind of what, you know, in a lot of ways the time when Mr. Bungle was, you know, from whatever, like 89 until whatever 2004, it was kind of like, just like I was getting like a real indoctrination, and kind of like, you know, and it's just like those guys just absolutely opened up my world and really influenced everything. And then like maybe in a way later, all this time later, I'm sort of reflecting it back through a lot of this Umlaut stuff, you know, even like when I'm trying to find a cool melody, you know, for a vocal part and stuff, I'm like, that's on some level, unconsciously or subconsciously, I'm thinking of Patton, you know, like what would be a thing that would like sound insane to like that coming through that voice, and just like fucking, it would just kill, and it'd just be, you know, and so that's kind of what even to this day Umlaut is kind of striving towards, you know. We're going like, it's kind of, there's this thing of going like, man, I in a perfect world I would have Mike, you know, singing that shit, but I'm like, I guess I gotta do it.
hey, I love your vocals. I love your vocals.
Thanks. No,
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Touch base on your Arantula and Kintsugi. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, kintsugi. Yeah, however you. And the other word is arunachala. It's all right. Yeah, I realize like in my old age, I'm like, I try to make a mental note not to correct people's pronunciations, because it's just so condescending. It's arunachala. Yeah.
Okay. Arunachala. I apologize.
Uh-huh. That's okay. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Right, but those were two fucking phenomenal releases that you both came out in 2019. Well, what was the random prolificness that popped up 2 releases in 1 year?
Patience. It was basically my impatience. Like, I think Angus, you know, was sort of like, man, with like, I think he was a little cut, that he didn't have as much influence on, like, say, Kintsugi as he's had in the past. And it was like, I think he was off doing Sex on Toe stuff, and I was like, man, I'm ready to put this out. I'm not waiting for, you know. And that's comes down to just straight impatience, where I, you know, I do have a lot of stuff, and I like things to have a timestamp where it's like, this is what I was going through, or this is what I'd gone through, and I wanted to reflect like a time in my life, so I can look back on those things and kind of go, oh yeah, and I can pinpoint like a, you know, like a sort of a, not a milestone, but more like a yardstick, but just sort of a signpost of where I was emotionally or whatever in my life. And I like that things can have that imprint on it, you know, sort of tells a story, you know, because there is stuff like that where, and nobody's sort of ever really asking like, what were you going through and why was it called Runachala and this and that kind of thing. And so at some point, maybe somebody will, but it was like, maybe that'll be an interesting discussion. Maybe it'll be boring. Maybe people are like, too much information, and we'll just let it be mysterious or something, or if they're even thinking about it at all. And fair enough. But it was just impatience. I was just kind of like, I always have this fantasy of like having a lot of output, and then just like people can, you know, like these bands that put out 2 albums a year and stuff. I'm like, yeah, why not? You know, like whether it's King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and whatever kind of thing. And then meanwhile, like Umlaut, we're getting ready to put out an album, and it's seemed like we've been warming up to this since before the pandemic, you know. And then there's all these lockdowns and things that happen, and and it's like, and I'm even at this point, I'm like, I was joking with the mixer yesterday. I was going like, man, we should just leak this album. Because I'm like, I just want to get it out there. It's like, we're not going to make money off this. There's no like business plan. it's just like, no, this is what we came up with in this period of time. It's what we were able to do. And Angus has been like pumping the brakes on these things because he's like, no, man, we're gonna do it right. We want this thing to sound good and all these kinds of things. And he's absolutely right. And so I'm just always just like, yeah, good enough, close enough is good enough. Let's get it out there. I'm like, let's move on to the next thing. So I'm starting to get bored. I don't want to not be excited to kind of sell or talk about a thing. I want to, be excited to talk about the thing and go, do the Kanye West thing. This is the greatest thing you've ever heard, man. And not that I really believe that. Yeah.
Tell me about Slow Melt, because that was one of my favorite tracks off that album.
Man, yeah, and mine too. Yeah, that was one that I did with Shane, the bass player, and he had a riff or a chord progression that married perfectly with mine, and then it just came out as one of the most like beautiful things I feel like I've ever done. Where I'm just like, it really kind of surprised me. And then even as I listen back to it now, I almost have this out of body thing going like, what the hell is this? And it's funny because even now I feel like I listen to a lot of kind of dark ambient stuff. And it's like, it really just soothes my, I don't know if it's like a spectrum-y thing or somewhere on the spectrum kind of thing for me, where I'm like, sometimes I like to sleep with white noise, and it's like but I don't know, that was just kind of a really cool thing that came together with Shane, so it's like not too many chefs in the kitchen. And then like he has something, a chord progression that just marries just perfectly with something that I have as well. And then as I listen to it, I'm like, holy shit, I can't remember whose is what. And it's just like, just beautiful, man. I was just like, I still, that is really one of my favorite things I've ever done in a lot of ways. And, in a perfect world, I'd have like real, a real like orchestral or symphonic kind of thing that I would like record properly, or maybe it's a re-record thing. I don't know. It'd be a thing like let's do this thing, but it's like I don't really know how to kind of explain where it came from or how it came. It was just, but it is just, sometimes you have these chord progressions which are just work perfectly with another person's idea, and it's just effortless and comes out really nicely.
Okay, so we have 4.5 minutes.
Okay.
Let's we're gonna have to skip over High Castle Tele Orchestra. Sorry, Tim. But we can. You have 2 singles that came out in the past couple of years. Bite Your Tongue, and you just came out with Every Time. Are they both going to be on the new album?
Yeah, absolutely.
What about Grumpy Library?
Going to be on there as well.
yes, because that was on the internet and then it disappeared, and it's like, no, it's gone. I'm glad it's coming back.
We've got another reimagining of that, and so it's going to be kind of I don't know. It feels like it's kind of one of the more no nonsense kind of like Umlaut releases forthcoming. I think some people might be like, well, there's maybe not as many instrumental kind of things going on. But it's sort of a different thing, and it's recorded really well, and we've taken a lot, maybe I feel like too much time on it. That's just my opinion with my impatience, but we're excited about it. We're excited for people to hear it, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised in some ways, and then just kind of like, I don't know, and I shouldn't make any predictions, because who knows, people might be like, whatever, we'll see where we go. But we are proud of what we've done, and I'm excited for people to hear it. And I'm people are like, hey, when is it coming out? And I'm like, I don't know exactly, but I probably, people feel like I'm like lying about like the timelines or whatever, and I would be like, I don't know what to say, but I'm like, I feel like it should be able to just put it out there. And that's why I was joking with this mixer yesterday. I'm like, man, we should just leak this thing, man. I'm like, I'm sick of waiting.
Well, if you ever do decide to leak it this way, man.
Okay, definitely.
But yeah, I'm quite excited about it as well. I'm quite excited.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Because out of now I'm constantly doing research, right? And out of all the post-bungle related projects, Umlaut is my favorite, right? I'm a huge
thanks, man.
fan, but Umlaut, you really fucking nailed it. I fucking love that shit.
Thanks so much. Yeah, man. I really am excited for people to hear this thing. It's funny, even my girlfriend was saying to me recently, she's like, stop stop telling people like, yeah, new album coming soon. She's like, don't do any of that shit. Like, she's like, the coolest bands just like, they just drop an album and you're like, whoa. Like, so maybe I'd do more of a Sopranos, like, oh, you know, you kind of like, you just sort of like, what the fuck is this? They didn't even know nothing. And then it's just there, you know, and then it's just, you're kind of like pleasantly surprised. And there was no kind of lead up of like counting the days and and then it's like, you know what I mean? Like, the more you anticipate and expect a thing, like maybe the more chance you are to be sort of disappointed. But when they just drop something out of nowhere, you're like, whoa, that one's like, that's amazing. You know, like kind of like when the when D'Angelo dropped that album, I think at the end of 2015 or something, that whatever Black Messiah, and you're just like, what? Like, I remember Angus said something like, yeah, D'Angelo just dropped like the album of the year, and you know, and then you listen to it and you're like, wow, this is really wild.
How amazing was that? Fucking full of great information. Fucking full of great information. I want to thank Bär for taking the time to answer all these questions. It was difficult to schedule it, and his patience is super fucking appreciated, man. Super appreciated. But make sure to, like I said, like, subscribe, click the bell, wherever it's going to be. Make some comments. Share that shit, you know. If you really enjoyed this video, give it a share. Let other people know how fucking awesome it is. But I'm gonna bounce off of here. Make sure to tune in next month for whatever the fuck I'm gonna feature. I don't know yet, but it's gonna be amazing. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next month.